My beloved child. Stay here. Do not let your attention drift away from these words, because something hidden beneath the surface of this story is beginning to move, and the first truth you hear will not be the truth that changes everything. There is a reason your heart has been sensing that something was incomplete. There is a reason certain moments with this person felt incredibly close, while others left you standing in a silence you could not explain. You may have wondered whether you misunderstood the connection, whether you expected too much, or whether something changed without you noticing. But there was always another chapter behind what you could see. Your soulmate has been carrying a truth about their marriage that they were afraid to place in your hands, and now circumstances are forcing them to face the very conversation they spent so long avoiding. Yet before you decide what this means, understand this. The marriage is only the doorway into the mystery. What happened behind that doorway is the part they never knew how to explain. For a long time, your soulmate believed silence would protect everyone. They thought that if they kept certain details buried, nobody would have to confront the difficult reality underneath their life. They could continue smiling when expected, answering ordinary questions, moving through familiar routines, and convincing themselves that eventually everything inside them would settle. But the heart does not become peaceful simply because the mouth remains quiet. Every unanswered question became heavier. Every hidden detail required another explanation. Every moment they spent pretending things were simple made the truth more complicated. And then you entered their emotional world, not as someone demanding answers, but as someone who unknowingly made them remember what honesty felt like. Something about you disturbed the carefully arranged silence inside them. It was not because you created their problems. Their unresolved story existed before you. But your presence became a mirror, and mirrors do not create what they reveal. Around you, they began noticing parts of themselves they had ignored for years. They noticed how easily they could speak about things they usually kept guarded. They noticed how strangely peaceful they felt during certain conversations with you. They noticed that your presence awakened questions they had trained themselves not to ask. And the most frightening question was not, "Do I care about this person?" They already knew the answer to that. The frightening question was, if this connection feels this honest, what does that say about the life I have been pretending is complete? That question followed them everywhere. They tried burying it beneath responsibilities. They tried becoming busier. They tried convincing themselves that feelings could be controlled by distance. There were moments when they intentionally stepped back from you, believing that less contact would make everything easier. But distance did something they never expected. Instead of making you disappear from their thoughts, it revealed how deeply the connection had already affected them. Your absence became louder than your presence had been. They began remembering tiny details, something you said casually, the way you understood something without needing a long explanation, a moment when you made them feel seen without asking them to perform. These memories did not simply make them miss you. They forced them to compare emotional honesty with emotional survival. But there was one truth standing between you and everything they wanted to say. The marriage. Every time they imagined revealing it, fear took control. They imagined your expression changing. They imagined the trust between you collapsing. They imagined you looking back at every meaningful interaction and questioning whether any of it had been real. That possibility terrified them because, ironically, the feelings they had struggled hardest to explain were the feelings they considered most genuine. They feared that one hidden truth would make you doubt every honest emotion surrounding it. So they waited. Then waiting became avoidance. Avoidance became a pattern. And eventually the secret became larger than the original situation. Your soulmate reached a point where they were no longer afraid only of telling you they were married. They were afraid of answering the question that would naturally follow, "Why didn't you tell me before?" There was no comfortable answer. They could explain fear. They could explain confusion. They could explain circumstances. But none of those explanations could erase the fact that you deserved clarity much earlier. This realization has been haunting them differently lately. Something happened recently that made it impossible for them to continue treating the situation like a problem that could be postponed. It began during an ordinary conversation with someone who knows them extremely well. This person noticed the changes. They noticed how your soulmate became distant whenever the future was mentioned. They noticed the unusual silence after certain questions. They noticed how someone who once seemed willing to accept everything without resistance had begun questioning choices that had remained untouched for years. Finally, the person asked, "What are you not telling me?" Your soulmate tried to laugh it away. They changed the subject. They gave a vague answer about being tired. But the person did not believe them. There was another pause, followed by another question. "This isn't about being tired, is it?" Your soulmate looked away, and that small movement revealed more than they intended. The person sitting with them had known them long enough to recognize when silence was protecting something. Then came the question your soulmate had feared hearing aloud. "Is there someone you haven't told me about?" Everything inside them stopped. They could have denied it. They almost did. The words were ready. One simple denial could have ended the conversation temporarily. But something inside your soulmate refused to continue the old pattern. They had spent too long creating peace through avoidance. They had spent too long allowing fear to speak for them. So instead of saying no, they remained silent. And that silence became the first confession. The person across from them understood immediately that something significant was happening. Yet instead of becoming angry, they asked quietly, "Who are they?" Your soulmate still did not say your name. That matters. Because before your name could enter the conversation, another truth needed to come out first. Your soulmate said, "It isn't what you think." The person responded, "Then tell me what it is." And for the first time in a very long time, your soulmate began speaking about the marriage without repeating the version everyone else already knew. They spoke about how it began. They spoke about decisions made during a period when they felt trapped between personal desire and responsibility. They spoke about expectations they had been afraid to disappoint. They admitted that they had believed commitment meant remaining silent about their own uncertainty. They thought doing what everyone expected would eventually make them feel certain. It never did. But listen carefully, because this does not make every decision right. Your soulmate knows that now. Difficult circumstances can explain a person's fear, but they do not automatically erase responsibility. And this is one of the biggest changes happening inside them. Before, they used circumstances to defend their silence. Now they are beginning to understand that explanations and accountability can exist together. Then the person listening asked something unexpected. Were you ever truly happy? Your soulmate could not answer. Not immediately. They searched through years of memories, trying to find a simple yes or no, but the answer was more complicated. There had been good moments. There had been kindness. There had been responsibilities fulfilled and memories created. This was not a story where every moment had been dark. And that complexity was precisely why your soulmate had remained frozen for so long. They feared that admitting something was missing would somehow invalidate everything that had once been meaningful. But eventually they whispered, "I don't know who I became." Those words changed the conversation. Because suddenly this was no longer only about a marriage. It was about identity. Your soulmate had spent so much time trying to keep everyone else comfortable that they had slowly stopped recognizing their own voice. They had become skilled at saying what would prevent conflict. They knew how to smile when questions became uncomfortable. They knew how to postpone decisions. They knew how to make everyone believe things were stable. Then they met you. And somehow you asked questions differently. Perhaps you did not even realize it. You were not interrogating them. You simply responded to the person beneath the performance. When they spoke, you sometimes noticed the emotion behind the words. When they became quiet, you did not always rush to fill the silence. Something about that made them feel exposed and safe at the same time. That combination frightened them. Because being seen feels beautiful until you are carrying something you are terrified to reveal. There were several moments when your soulmate almost told you. One happened during a conversation that seemed ordinary to you. You said something about honesty, trust, or people being able to tell the truth without pretending to be perfect. Your soulmate became unusually quiet afterward. You may have assumed they were distracted. They were not. Inside their mind, an entire confession had begun. They imagined telling you everything. They imagined saying, "There is something about my life you don't know." They imagined your questions. They imagined answering them. Then fear returned. What if they leave? And the confession disappeared before it reached their lips. But the sentence remained inside them. There is something about my life you don't know. They carried that sentence into the next day. And the next. Eventually it became almost unbearable. Yet there is another reason they hesitated, and this reason is connected to the deeper mystery surrounding the marriage. Your soulmate believed that simply telling you, "I am married," would create an incomplete picture. They feared you would hear those words and understandably form conclusions before they could explain the circumstances surrounding the relationship. But instead of trusting you with the whole truth, they chose silence. And silence created something worse. It removed your ability to decide for yourself. This is the lesson they are confronting now. You deserve information that affects your heart. You deserve the freedom to make choices based on reality. No spiritual connection, however intense, removes that right. And your soulmate is beginning to understand that genuine love does not hide important truths to control another person's reaction. Genuine love gives the other person enough truth to choose freely. This realization hit them harder than expected. Because suddenly they understood that their greatest fear, losing you, had pushed them toward behavior that could cause exactly that. For the first time, they saw the contradiction clearly. They wanted your trust while hiding something important. They wanted closeness while maintaining distance around the truth. They wanted you to understand them without giving you the information required to understand them. And they knew something had to change. The person sitting across from your soulmate listened quietly as all of this emerged. Then they asked, "Does this person know you're married?" Your soulmate lowered their eyes. No. The answer was barely audible. The person did not shout. That somehow made the moment heavier. They simply asked, "Why?" Your soulmate gave several explanations. Fear. Timing. Confusion. They said they never knew how to begin the conversation. They said every day they waited made the next day harder. They said they were afraid the connection would disappear the moment you learned the truth. Then the other person said something your soulmate was not prepared to hear. If you really care about them, you have to give them the choice. Those words broke through every excuse. Give them the choice. Your soulmate realized that was exactly what their secrecy had prevented. You had been trying to understand a story without all its pages. And suddenly they felt the weight of every moment you might have blamed yourself. Every time you wondered why they pulled away. Every time their behavior changed without explanation. Every time you questioned whether you mattered. Your soulmate began seeing those moments through your eyes. That was when the conversation became emotional. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Quiet. Your soulmate admitted something they had never said aloud. "I think I hurt them by trying not to hurt them." The other person answered, "Then stop protecting the secret." Silence. Your soulmate knew what those words meant. It was time. But then something happened that changed the direction of the entire conversation. Your soulmate stood up and walked toward a place where they had kept something private for years. They returned carrying an item connected to the beginning of the marriage. The person watching them looked confused. "What is that?" Your soulmate did not answer. They placed it down. There were papers inside. Old ones. Some had dates. Some contained handwriting. And one contained a statement that made the person across from them stop completely. They read it once. Then again. Their expression changed. Until that moment, they had believed they understood why the marriage happened. They realized they did not. "What is this?" they asked. Your soulmate sat down slowly. "This is the part nobody knows." And suddenly the hidden marriage was no longer the biggest secret. There had been an agreement. A promise. Not the romantic promise everyone assumed. Something else. Something involving responsibility. Something your soulmate had believed they could never walk away from without hurting someone they once deeply cared about. The person continued reading. Then they looked up. Does your soulmate know about this? No. Does anyone? Not everything. That answer changed the atmosphere. Because now another question appeared. Why had your soulmate protected this detail even from people who already knew about the marriage? The explanation came slowly. Years earlier, someone had needed help during an extremely difficult period. Your soulmate had stepped forward believing they were doing the right thing. One decision became another. Expectations formed around them. Emotional responsibilities became promises. Eventually your soulmate found themselves living inside a commitment that looked completely different from the circumstances that originally created it. Over time, the original reason became buried beneath appearances. People stopped asking how everything started. They only saw what existed afterward. Your soulmate allowed that misunderstanding because correcting it would have required revealing private details involving other people. So they remained quiet. But again, silence grew. And now you had entered the story. Suddenly keeping everyone else's privacy meant hiding essential truth from you. Your soulmate realized there was no perfect solution. Someone would be disappointed. Someone might misunderstand. Something would change. But change had already begun. Because your soulmate could no longer pretend that avoiding truth was protecting anyone. The person across from them closed the papers and asked, "What are you going to do?" Your soulmate looked toward the window. For several moments, they said nothing. Then they whispered, "Tell the truth." Everything? Another pause. Everything. Those words frightened them the moment they were spoken. Because everything included you. It included the marriage. It included the reason it began. It included the emotional distance that developed afterward. It included their feelings. It included the moments they almost contacted you. It included the truth about why they disappeared at certain times. And it included something else they had never planned to reveal. Something they had done recently. Something involving you. Your soulmate had written something. Not a casual message. Not a few emotional sentences. They had written the entire truth. They started it late one night after realizing they might never have enough courage to explain everything face to face without becoming overwhelmed. The first sentence was simple. "I owe you the truth." Then they wrote for hours. They explained the marriage. They explained the promise. They explained why they had hidden it. They admitted where they were wrong. They refused to ask automatically for forgiveness because they knew forgiveness could not be demanded. They wrote that you deserved the freedom to decide what happened next. Then they reached the final paragraph. And stopped. Because there was one thing they still could not bring themselves to write. The deepest truth. The thing that would make the entire message impossible to take back. They left the letter unfinished. 4 days. Every night they looked at it. Every night they considered deleting it. But they never did. Then, after the conversation you just heard about, your soulmate returned to that unfinished message. They opened it again. They read everything from beginning to end. And when they reached the empty final paragraph, something inside them changed. They began typing. Slowly. One sentence. Then another. Then another. Until finally the words they had been terrified to admit were sitting directly in front of them. Your soulmate stared at the screen. Their hands were trembling. Because now the truth existed outside their mind. They could see it. They could read it. They could no longer pretend they did not know what they wanted to say. But understand this, beloved child, whatever another person chooses, your worth remains untouched. Their marriage does not reduce your value. Their confusion does not define your future. Their hidden choices are not evidence that you were unworthy of honesty. And if this person truly wants a place in your life, the path toward you cannot be built from secrecy. It must be built from accountability, clarity, patience, and respect for whatever choice you make after knowing the truth. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that. And perhaps that is why the next moment became so significant. They moved the cursor toward the final button. The message was ready. Everything they had hidden was inside it. The marriage. The promise. The regret. The reason. The feelings. And the final confession. For several seconds, your soulmate simply stared. Then their phone vibrated. A new message appeared. Not from you. From the person connected to the marriage. Your soulmate opened it. There were only a few lines. But after reading them, they immediately closed the message they had prepared for you. Their face changed. Because the person had discovered something. Something about the original promise. Something your soulmate had believed for years was still binding them. And the message contained a sentence they never expected to read. You need to know what really happened before our marriage. Your soulmate froze. They read it again. Then another message arrived. This one contained a photograph of something old. Something dated before the marriage. Your soulmate enlarged the image. Their breathing changed. Because there, hidden inside something they had never seen before, was proof that the story they had believed for years was incomplete. And beneath the photograph came one final message. There is something I should have told you before you ever made that promise. Your soulmate stared at those words, unable to move. Because suddenly they realized they were not the only person who had been keeping a secret.